What's going on, guys, and welcome to my Friday Night SmackDown audio review for January 24th, 2025. I'm Graham Giason Matthews. Hope you guys are doing well, enjoying the weekend, and are getting ready for WWE Saturday Night's main event coming up in mere hours from when we speak right now. I was going to record earlier, as we have in recent weeks, not right after SmackDown, but Saturday morning, shortly following the show, not right after on Friday nights, but didn't have a chance earlier. We were out, Alexis and I, so I'm going live now, reviewing SmackDown from last night before Saturday night's main event coming up a little bit later on in just a few short hours. So I'm going to try to make this quick, get in, get out, give my thoughts on the show for as long as I can anyway. This was a 3-hour SmackDown. We are not having a 3-hour stream as we did with hashtag AskGSM on Tuesday. That is sustainable. I got through 3 hours of that in a breeze. 3 hours of SmackDown on Friday nights is just way too fucking much. That is just way too long for any episode of Raw, SmackDown. For a PLE, it's totally fine. But for an episode of SmackDown, it's just not sustainable. So we're going to get into that. We already gave our predictions for the Saturday night's main event coming up a little bit later on tonight on Thursday's Wrestle Rant Radio. I'll run through a quick preview of the show at the end of this review, running down the card, and I'll talk a little bit about it as we go through SmackDown from last night. So keep an eye out for that. But we'll go through the card for tonight's show a little bit later on. And like I said, the predictions are already up here on the channel from Thursday's Wrestle Rant Radio. The excerpts went up on Friday. So that's really about it. I thought there was one other thing I wanted to mention, aside from the fact that with the intro here on these live streams, I still have no music. I was putting the Wrestle Rant Radio music as part of the intro music for these other streams, and it was copywriting strike me for some reason, despite the fact that it's supposed to be copyright-free music. That's why it works for the intro. When I use it for the intro with the voiceover over it, I don't get copyright stricken or whatever the word would be. But when I use it without a voiceover, it copyright strikes me. I don't know why. So we got to get different music for now. It's going to be silent before we ease right into the streams here, but just something to keep an eye on. I also did want to mention, this was the second thing I wanted to mention before we got going here. No SmackDown review coming up next Saturday. Very, very likely, since I'll be in Indianapolis for Royal Rumble weekend. We'll be doing a Wrestle Rant Radio. Might be flying solo for that, but we'll find out. That's going to be going up on Thursday evening, so keep an eye out for that. I know we've obviously been doing the show in recent weeks on Thursday mornings, early Thursday mornings. We're around noon. It's going to be different next Thursday, this coming Thursday. It's going to be like in the late afternoon, early evening if I can. That's currently the plan. And then on Saturday, I will not only watch SmackDown, I'm hoping to be at SmackDown because it's for the first time in many years in the same host city as the Royal Rumble. I'm hoping to be at SmackDown on Friday. Saturday morning, I might be at another commitment, so I won't be able to break down SmackDown here on the channel. I'll probably put up some other videos, maybe an interview or two that I did from Friday at the Junket for Royal Rumble weekend. So just wanted to give you guys a heads up. No SmackDown review coming up next Saturday, which is why, honestly, if it wasn't for that, I probably would not be doing this review right now. There was some stuff that happened on this show for January 24th, 2025. We'll get into it, some Royal Rumble card additions, some additions to just a number of other stuff that's going on currently on SmackDown. An update on the return of Charlotte Flair. We found out when she's coming back. Match announcements for next week. Transfer window updates. That was another big thing from the show. We'll talk about that. But beyond all of that sort of stuff, it wasn't a completely meaningless show because stuff did happen and stuff was announced. But in terms of the shit that we saw on the show itself, it was pretty fucking boring. It was extremely boring. We'll get through it. And like I said, SmackDown as a 3-hour program is simply not sustainable. So if you're joining live, be sure to join in on the chat. I would appreciate it. We'll get your thoughts on the show and talk about it, as well as any thoughts on tonight's Saturday night's main event. Your predictions for the show. We'll get into it. And be sure to hit the bell button to be notified every time a video goes up. If you're not already subscribed, please do so. You'll get notified every time we go live here on the channel, every time a video goes up. That stuff it's greatly appreciated. So thank you so much. Daniel's in here in the chat. Daniel Malcolm, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. Got any thoughts on the show? Be sure to let me know, and I'll read it out here as we get going here with our thoughts on SmackDown. So let's not waste any more time. We open up SmackDown with Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes and Joe Tessitore doing an in-ring interview before their contract signing tonight. Cody Rhodes is having a contract signing at tonight's Saturday night's main event with Kevin Owens. So honestly, I thought coming into the SmackDown, because they did not advertise anything with Cody Rhodes on the show, at least as far as from what I saw, I'm thinking, okay, he probably won't be on the show, or it's going to be a video package or something along those lines. And it wasn't. He was in the ring being interviewed by Joe Tessitore. So it makes me wonder, how much are we actually going to hear from Cody at tonight's contract signing? I know Shawn Michaels will be in there. That's going to be a cool attraction for the San Antonio crowd because he's obviously from that area. San Antonio's own the Heartbreak Kid. I get it. But it's like, if we're hearing from Cody on Friday, and this was a good promo addressing Kevin Owens, then what more can they possibly say to each other before the match coming up next weekend? Now, I will give an update on this. They did say later on in the show, they once again referenced, and I skipped through a lot of like what the commentators are saying in between the matches because a lot of it is really just filler. But I did catch this. The commentators did make reference to the fact of the aforementioned addendum to the contract from last week, a last-minute change. And I don't know if they were speculating what it would be, but they did bring it up for a reason. I would be shocked if we got through this contract signing tonight and they did not make some sort of a change to the match. Now, as we were talking about on Wrestle Rant Radio the other day, and I was chatting with other people about this, what could the change possibly be? I mean, it's already a ladder match. It's for both belts. I would imagine this is the blow-off to the whole Winged Eagle thing, and then we can move on from that, which I don't want to. I would wish they would hold on to the Winged Eagle Championship and retire the other championship design, but that's obviously not going to happen. But, you know, aside from doing something with the belts, like, oh, if you pull down one of the belts, that's the one that we keep. Why wouldn't they want to pull down the Winged Eagle Championship in that case? Maybe it's a transfer thing, because we've been getting a lot more transfers in the last week. Bayley moving to Raw this past Monday. I believe it was this past Monday. I don't know, all the weeks blend together, so it's kind of hard to remember. But, I mean, that was this past Monday with Bayley. We had a lot more transfer window updates on SmackDown last night. So I'm thinking maybe the loser gets transferred to Raw. Obviously not out of nowhere. They would need an equal star of value in return. I don't really like that idea, though. Maybe Kevin Owens goes to Raw, because we've seen so much of Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes. They might be thinking, okay, we can't have them continue to coexist on the same show. Maybe one of them goes to Monday nights. But if you do that, then you're sacrificing yourself the feud of Kevin Owens and Randy Orton. Because that's the match to do. Kevin Owens was responsible for putting Randy Orton on the shelf a couple of months ago. I don't know if you do that at Elimination Chamber. I don't know if you do that at WrestleMania. That was my initial idea before that whole Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn segment on Raw this week. I don't know if you do it after WrestleMania. I'm not really sure. But honestly, at the same time, I just said that if they move Kevin Owens to Raw, they can't do that feud. And that would line up with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. But honestly, and we'll get into the transfer window stuff, does it even really matter? Does it even really matter what show anyone is assigned to if people are just floating from brand to brand anyway? And you cannot make the excuse, oh, it's Royal Rumble season. That's why they're appearing on Raw. Raw people are on SmackDown. SmackDown people on Raw. NXT people are on both brands, blah, blah, blah. They did that last Royal Rumble season. They did that before Survivor Series. They did that after Survivor Series. They did that going into SummerSlam. They've been doing it a lot for the last number of months. That tells me they want to do a brand split without not actually adhering to a brand split. Now, I'm not going to be so strict as they once was to say they got to stay on that show and they can never appear on the other brand. If it makes sense, then fine. But I mean, it felt like they were paying a lot more attention to that sort of stuff previously. You want to send Damian Priest, who has joined SmackDown, spoiler alert, we'll talk about that later. You want to send him to SmackDown as an official member of the show, that's great. But what the fuck does that even mean if you have Nia Jax, who is not transferring over to Raw, challenging for a Raw Women's World Championship? It means absolutely nothing is the point. That's the answer. It means absolutely nothing. Daniel Malcolm in the chat, he said, do you think Kevin Owens attacks Shawn Michaels since they're in San Antonio? I think it would be great. I don't think he will. I don't think Shawn Michaels, and all the angles that he's been involved in on NXT in recent years, with Grayson Waller and maybe Carmelo Hayes, among other people, has he really gotten truly physical? I know him and Eddie Thorpe got into a shoving match in NXT in Lowell. I was there for that show a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago. It's not like he hit him with a super kick or some shit, so I don't think so. It would be great to see Kevin Owens give Shawn Michaels a package pile driver. I just don't see it. But it's possible. I mean, I was going to say it didn't happen with Triple H, so it won't happen with Shawn Michaels, but Triple H has a legitimate heart health issue that he can't take bumps. Shawn Michaels can still hit the occasional sweet chin music or take a bump and it would be fine. He just doesn't. But Daniel's second comment, he said, Kevin Owens going to Raw would make sense if him and Sami are indeed going to be the Mania match. I mean, it seems that way. Like I said, that would make sense. But like I also said a moment ago, does that shit even matter at this point? They're having Nia Jax challenge for the championship tonight, a Raw title from a Raw superstar, and she's not on Raw. And she was on Raw this week. She's not an official member of the Raw roster is my point, but she was on Raw wrestling Bayley. Bayley's on Raw officially, but Nia Jax is not. But we'll have Nia Jax wrestle Bayley on. What the fuck is the point? What's the point? It's not even as if, oh, you have to be on that show to challenge for that championship, because Nia, it just, whatever. It's not even really worth putting thought into, because they clearly have not put thought into this. Triple H has not put enough thought into it. So why should we? You know what I mean? We had the Motor City Machine Guns taking on Pretty Deadly. This kind of stems from the whole Motor City Machine Guns, DIY, Pretty Deadly, Los Garza drama as of late. Pretty Deadly kind of felt like they were doing DIY a favor by blaming Los Garza. The attack on the Profits, which, by the way, where the fuck have they been? Where have the Profits been? And it's not even as if you could say, oh, they got attacked, so they've been out ever since. First of all, that was almost 2 months ago, and it was a simple attack backstage. They were not, like, fucking stabbed, as far as we know. They were simply attacked backstage. But it's not even that. I mean, Jade Cargill was. She was attacked backstage, but that was a lot more brutal and bloody. We saw the carnage of that. The Profits was a pretty simple attack. They were back the following week or two, and we have not seen them since. There's a lot of talk going on right now. I know there was a whole clip here on the channel the other day about Alexa Bliss and the update on her. What we did not know when we recorded that on Thursday was that it was a major contract thing. Apparently, Alexa Bliss was due back on WWE TV within the last week or two, and she's not currently back on TV because of a contract issue. And they want her to sign a new deal, or they wanted to bring her back under her existing deal, which would make sense. She wants to sign a new deal, her team does, or whatever it is. And they couldn't come to an agreement in time, so they're just not having her on TV at the moment. So I'm just saying, like, I'm not saying it's the exact same situation. It probably isn't. They probably just don't have anything for the Profits at the moment. But I'm just thinking maybe it's an idea of, I mean, they're going to be at Royal Rumble weekend. I saw them advertise for that Royal Rumble weekend photo autograph experience thing that I'm hoping to attend to get my replica IC title belt signed. But maybe it's a contract issue. Maybe they don't know if Montez Ford or Angelo Dawkins or both are committed to new deals. So therefore, we're not going to use them right now in the tag team title picture, because it is weird they're not challenging for the championships alongside Motor City Machine Guns. Could they stretch this all the way to Mania and make it a triple threat tag team title match? Yeah. I don't think the Machine Guns and DIY feud for another 2 or 3 months. Mania is on April 19th and 20th. It's January 25th. So I don't see that happening. I don't know what's going on with the Profits. There's a lot of people you could say, even though the show is 3 hours, we are not seeing A, B, or C on these shows. Like Giovanni Vinci, he's not a priority clearly, but like if this show is supposed to give more people opportunities, we're seeing that with Legado and Los Garza. That's great. But where are the Profits? Where's this guy? Where's that girl? It doesn't really make sense. But back to my original point, I thought the Machine Guns and the Pretty Deadly, like they're the Pretty Deadly. No, Pretty Deadly and the Motor City Machine Guns. I thought they had a really good match in the time they were given. Two talented teams. Pretty Deadly, clearly a comedy team. We know that, but we also know they can hold their own. They've had good matches on SmackDown in the past year or two. They had good matches in NXT. They had good matches in NXT UK. They're a quality tag team. So it's nice to see them doing their thing right now. Obviously, they lost, as they always do, but it was the right result. I thought they had a good match. And there were a lot of other matches that really don't get enough time on SmackDown, despite it being a 3-hour show. And that really doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me as to why that's the case. But I do think they're doing a good job of giving some matches some more time. I'll talk about some matches that got shortchanged a little bit later on. I don't think this was one of them. It felt like it was not decently long, but as long as it probably needed to be. So we'll get to the Machine Guns a little bit later on as far as what they're doing at the Royal Rumble. Daniel Malcolm in the chat against the tag title match being at the Rumble. Triple H definitely heard the online criticisms, LOL. I mean, I'm not saying he listens to me. Triple H has no idea who I am. But I have been one of the people on the front line for the past, 6 months, saying, not on like these streams specifically, but I have said on these streams, it is absolutely inexcusable that we are not seeing more of the tag team titles for the men. The women's have been defended on pay-per-view, which is honestly miraculous that's even the case. That the women's tag team titles have gotten more pay-per-view matches, like defenses of that championship on pay-per-view, than there's 2 men's tag team titles. There's only 1 women's. The women's were defended at Backlash. They were defended at Clash of the Castle. They were defended at Bash in Berlin. That's 3 shows right there. And they were defended at, I don't think it was Bad Blood. I think it was Crown Jewel. That's 4 pay-per-views that we had women's tag team title matches. Since then, we've had no men's tag team title matches on pay-per-view. I was going to get to it later, but I will mention it here because they did interact with DIY later on. But it was made official on this show. It's going to be the Machine Guns and DIY for the WWE Tag Team titles at the Royal Rumble, our first men's tag team title match at a PLE since WrestleMania 9-10 months ago. Completely inexcusable, but better late than never. And not only are they doing that match, it's a 2 out of 3 falls match. A match that DIY is obviously very familiar with, as is the Revival. They had their very famous series of matches in 2 out of 3 falls matches in NXT. They had that great 2 out of 3 falls match. I think it was at TakeOver Toronto. The Revival had a few of them. They had one with DIY. They had one with American Alpha, I think, on TV at one point. But DIY have also had their fair share amount of 2 out of 3 falls matches as well. I think they had one on the main roster maybe about a year ago with Imperium that they won. But they've had a few of them. And this one should be no different. If given time, which it fucking better should be. I'm not expecting like the first fall in the first 2 minutes. That would be just stupid. That would just be lame. Like, give it actual time. You know what I mean? If it's given time, it could be a great match. Richie joining in on the chat. Richie, I love you, my man. Thank you for joining us as always. I appreciate it. He says, the live streams continue. Indeed, they do. A little bit later than usual here on a Saturday afternoon before the big show coming up later on tonight. But we are here talking SmackDown, hopefully making this more interesting than SmackDown itself was on Friday night. So we had Kevin Owens out next. He was out at the commentator desk, going off on Joe Tessitore, comparing him to Michael Cole, who he also doesn't like. Kind of blaming Joe for taking Cody Rhodes' side after interviewing Cody at the beginning of the show. Also getting in the face of Matthew McConaughey, who was in the front row at this show. They were in Texas last night. Maybe Dallas? I know they're in they were in Austin. They were in Austin, Texas. I remember them saying that a few times. They were in Austin, and they're in San Antonio tonight for Saturday night's main event. But he got in the face of Matthew McConaughey, and they showed him, like, across the show, by the way, because he was behind the commentators, never really got involved, but I thought that was a great cameo, of all people, from Matthew McConaughey. Gabriel Iglesias was also there. Fluffy's great. I interviewed him about a year ago. Very cool dude. But, we see him at a lot of shows. He was at the Raw Netflix premiere a couple of weeks ago. That wasn't really a new face by any means. We also saw Michelle McCool at ringside a little bit later on, as well as Texas native Mark Henry with his daughter, actually, which was a cool moment. But Fatima in the chat also saying, if I'm mispronouncing it, please let me know. But they mentioned Rhea Ripley Women's Championship versus Nia Jax. Saturday night main event, January 25th, 2025. Yes, indeed, that is happening tonight. But anyway, they had Jimmy Uso out there attacking Kevin Owens after Kevin Owens went off on Joe Tessitore. And he was also getting the face of Matthew McConaughey, as I mentioned. And they had Jimmy Uso out there going after Kevin Owens, getting the better of Kevin Owens, setting up their match for later on in the night. A match that didn't really matter. I thought it was a perfectly fine match for what it was, which we'll get to a little bit later on. But between this and the stuff that we saw with the women, not the next women's tag team match that we're going to be talking about here in a second, but rather the women's tag team match that we got a little bit later on, the 6-woman tag team match, just completely, impulse stuff. Stuff that we were seeing on Raw once upon a time during the 3-hour era when they were really just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what stuck and stuff like that. That was really the case here, where we were getting a match where it really just kind of felt like it was to kill time. And we'll get to that in a moment. The women's match I'm about to mention, Michin and B-Fab against Green and Piper, I thought was good for the time given. It wasn't really long at all. That match felt more meaningful than the 6-woman tag team match. And this was the point in the show where I'm thinking, okay, they didn't advertise Owens and Jimmy Uso in advance. They did announce later on that we're getting Carmelo Hayes and Kevin Owens again or Jimmy Uso and Carmelo Hayes, rather, again next week. That match makes sense. They've been feuding a little bit as of late. That match makes sense. But I don't really understand, why they need to keep setting up matches on the show itself for later on in the night. I know Raw was doing that for a while during the 3-hour era. I get it. To me, it just feels like lazy booking. It just feels like their way of trying to kill time as effectively as possible when you could do a better job of that. But getting back to the aforementioned tag team match, Michin and B-Fab, who have been a bit of an alliance as of late, taking on the Women's United States Champion at Chelsea Green and Piper Niven. I thought this was fine for the time given. Like I said, it was only a 3-minute match. B-Fab is not going to get any better if she doesn't have any real ring time to improve. I don't know if she was wrestling on the house shows when they were doing them. They don't really do a lot of house shows anymore, so it's kind of hard for her to improve if she's not being given reps. Just in my opinion, Michin's a bigger priority. Green and Niven are bigger priorities. So the fact she didn't really get a lot of ring time here doesn't really bother me. It wasn't about B-Fab. But Chelsea Green getting pinned by Michin. So A slightly surprising result, but it did set up another match between those two for next week's SmackDown for that Women's United States Championship. So I thought they might say, oh, they're adding it to Saturday night's main event. And I'm glad they didn't because we already have 4 matches on that show. We don't need a 5th one. They did 5 matches at the last one, and a lot of those matches were shortchanged for time. Didn't really make a whole lot of sense to do, 5 matches on that show. And, they did 5 matches, and they were good matches, but they weren't really given a whole lot of time. So I'm glad that they're only doing 4 in a contract signing, so I guess maybe the matches will be short. I guess we'll find out. It's only a 2-hour special. But no, they're not doing that rematch on the show tonight. They're not even doing it at the Royal Rumble. They're doing it on SmackDown over Royal Rumble weekend next Friday night. So I would expect Chelsea Green to retain, and they can finally move on from this feud. Michin says she has backup, so hopefully she won't be distracted by Piper Niven again. That would just be lame, so I really hope they don't go in that direction. But I thought the match for what it was fine. This is where we got that segment that we would have seen on Raw once upon a time, where it's just promo after promo after promo. Just a revolving door of promos. With Tiffany Stratton out there initially talking about retaining the championship against Bayley, who was last year's Royal Rumble winner, and everyone who was competing in this year's Women's Royal Rumble that very few people up to this point in the show had declared for from Raw or SmackDown. I think Bayley was the only one. I had seen Bayley's name announced, then Nia Jax. But Nia Jax came out during the segment and said, I'm officially entering myself into the Royal Rumble. And I'm thinking, I thought she was already confirmed for the Royal Rumble match. And not only that, she's getting a championship shot tonight. And I know she obviously addressed the obvious. She's like, I know I'm challenging for the Women's World Championship. She had explained herself before I could even really question it out loud. I understand that. But it makes it even more obvious that she's not winning. Maybe they just want to insult our intelligence because they know that we know that Nia's not winning tonight. So they're just like, fuck it. We'll just announce her for, the Royal Rumble match anyway. Everyone knows that she's not winning tonight, so let's just put her in the match. Why not just have her announce herself next week? She loses to Rhea, says she wants another opportunity at Rhea. It's just dumb to me that they would just be like, oh yeah, she's in the match. Okay, but she has a title match tonight. She's not winning the belt and then is going to be in the Rumble. We know she's not beating Rhea, who just got the belt back. And she's not going to enter the Rumble as champion. We've seen it before. Brock did it 5 years ago. Charlotte did it a couple of years ago. It's not that it hasn't been done. I just don't see that happening. I don't think a single soul on this earth, or anyone beyond this earth, including aliens, thinks that Nia Jax will actually win the championship tonight. And this just merely solidified that. But even before she came out, they had Rhea Ripley out there interacting with Tiffany. So this is what I'm saying. Like, people can transfer from brand to brand, but it doesn't really matter if you have Raw and SmackDown people on the other show just without any real rhyme or reason. And there really wasn't a reason for them to be there. Like, you had Nia out there with Candice LeRae. You had Liv Morgan out there with Raquel Rodriguez. Bianca Belair and Naomi with the WWE Women's Tag Team titles. All this other sort of stuff. And a lot of them all declared for the Rumble. Obviously, Rhea Ripley's not in the Women's Rumble. But, a lot of these other women are. Which makes sense, but they really should have taken the time to announce themselves for the Women's Rumble prior to this point. Why did it take until now to hear from Liv Morgan that she's going to be in the Women's Rumble? She was on Raw this week in a quick backstage segment with Dominic Mysterio. Why not have her announce on her own show, whether it be this past week or next week on Raw, that she's going to be in the Rumble? It's just lazy to me. And then that set up the 6-woman tag team match, which was fine. It was a good match, but it just screams filler. This is why SmackDown, until June reportedly, is not sustainable as a 3-hour show. It just makes no fucking sense. It just makes 0 sense. Richie in the chat said, are you and Alexis tuning in for Saturday night main event tonight? Yes, I will be watching live. Alexis is busy, but she is hoping to be back in time to watch the show with me live. So we'll see. I mean, it's not exactly a must-see show by any means. She's not like, oh, I can't wait to watch this second, probably pretty predictable installment of Saturday night's main event. But she did want to watch it, so she did want to watch it, I mean to say. So she hopes to watch it with me live. But I definitely will be watching live starting at 8. I'm pretty sure, bearing any unforeseen circumstance. Richie also said, 3 hours of SmackDown just ain't it. I'm not sure why they haven't figured out how to book the show properly to find where it's paced well. The format seems so off for this brand. I mean, I know we were used to it with Raw, but the weird thing is, it's not like, oh, I can't sit here and say it doesn't work for SmackDown, but it worked for Raw. Like, it didn't work for Raw for 10 plus years. But at least towards the end of those 3-hour, Raw eras, before they went back to 2 hours briefly late last year, a lot of those 3-hour Raws, they found their rhyme and rhythm. And it worked. And I thought it was, it was a good formula, and I thought they were producing solid shows and whatnot, and it was pretty good. But maybe because they had the roster for it, like, it's not a different writing team, right? Isn't it all the same people that are writing Raw or also writing SmackDown? That's what doesn't really make sense to me. It's all the same people. It's Triple H overseeing both shows. I know they don't really have the depth of a 3-hour roster on SmackDown, which is why they're using Raw people. And even then, these shows feel like a bore. They feel like a chore to watch. Not every show's been awful. Like, these aren't terrible shows. But, like, we were seeing far better SmackDowns at 2 hours. And even then, they were not amazing shows every week. But 2 hours, you have a much better chance of delivering a successful show compared to the 3-hour format. Just my opinion. So again, it's Triple H booking all of this stuff, among other writers and producers and shit. I get that. But, like, why is there such a distinct difference between what we were getting with 3 hours of Raw about a year ago, 6 months ago, and even now at 2.5 hours, and SmackDown? It's just like night and day. It's very weird to me, which is why I do not want to see SmackDown longer as a 3-hour show for any longer than it needs to be. And it sounds like, according to Triple H, it's only through May or June, and they could always either, continue it as a 3-hour show past that point. There's nothing stopping them from doing that, or going back to 3 hours later on in the year. We just don't know yet. But at least at that point, hopefully there is a chance they do go back to 2 hours permanently. But it sounds like we're stuck with this formula until then, which is not good. Daniel Malcolm, he says, I was watching the 2005 Royal Rumble the other day, and it reminded me how they used to do a great job of keeping the brands separate. Yeah, from 02 to 05, it does make sense. It made sense as they made it make sense. The brand split mattered. It was like a novelty thing. They were first starting out. And it's honestly shocking they had it stick for that long as a serviceable brand split. You know what I mean? Like, it made sense for 3 years, and they made it matter. When people were going from Raw to SmackDown, they drafted people, or they had the brands feud. Like, I wasn't even watching at that point. I grew up when they still had the brand split in like 08, 09, 2010. By that point, it hardly fucking mattered. But it mattered even more then than it does now. In early 2025, it just does not matter in my opinion whatsoever. But yeah, the 05 Rumble's a great example of that. I don't know if they had 15 Raw people and 15 SmackDown people. They may have made it that way in like the 04 Rumble, maybe, because you got to leave the door open for potential surprises and stuff like that. But it was largely like Raw guys versus SmackDown guys. It felt like it mattered. In 2025, it doesn't fucking matter at all. That was 20 years ago. He also said, to the point, the interactions between brands actually meant something. Exactly. Like, at this point, they just mean absolutely nothing because we see it so frequently. And people move without any real rhyme or reason. Oh, this guy's transferred. Okay, cool. But what does that mean when you have Nia Jax on Raw wrestling there every fucking week when she's supposed to be on SmackDown? That doesn't really make much sense to me. But the 6-woman tag team match that I mentioned I thought was good. Liv Morgan, Nia Jax, and Candice beating Bianca Belair, Naomi, and Rhea. I thought it was a well-wrestled, well-worked match. I enjoyed it for what it was, but it was just like, what is the point? Aside from building momentum for the Royal Rumble, I don't really understand what the point of this is supposed to be. So Liv Morgan did pick up the win for her team, though. She pinned Bianca Belair, so maybe Liv Morgan, gets another opportunity at the WWE Women's Tag Team titles with Raquel. I know she challenged for the championship against Bianca and Jade like months ago, but now that it's Bianca and Naomi, who are kind of short on challengers, I know they're defending against the Metaphors, Lash Legend and Jakar Jackson coming up on Tuesday's NXT. Maybe they could set that up as a rematch for like a coming Raw or SmackDown or something like that. I don't know. I guess we'll find out in due time. Apollo Crews getting a rare match on SmackDown. He's been kind of poking in people's business for the last couple of months. And she, or Apollo Crews, she. I guess Apollo Crews changed genders. Apollo Crews kind of poking in people's business with the Street Profits stuff and the DIY stuff and the Pretty Deadly stuff. So we got a match on the show between Johnny Gargano and Apollo Crews that I'm sure would have been an absolute banger on the independent scene in PWG 10, 15 years ago. Would have been a great match in NXT 10 years ago. On SmackDown in 2025, it was a good match, but how much time, when you really don't devote a lot of time to these matches, are people really going to care? People, the general audience, even when they were trying to push him as a heel, and I like Apollo Crews a lot, but the general audience has not given a shit about this man in years, if they've ever given a shit about him at all on the main roster. So putting him out there and just doing his own thing with Johnny Gargano, I mean, it was good. They had a nice match, but I mean, even if they made it like a 10, 15-minute match, I can't imagine people would have really given a shit unless they, devoted more time to it or gave it more storyline support. It's kind of hard to say. But Apollo Crews ended up winning off a distraction from the Motor City Machine Guns at ringside. They distracted him, and that ended up leading to Apollo Crews picking up the win. He distracted Gargano, or Chris Sabin and Alex Shelley did. So leading to the announcement from Nick Aldis afterward that it will be the Motor City Machine Guns and DIY in a 2 out of 3 falls match for the WWE Tag Team titles coming up at the Royal Rumble, and not at Saturday night's main event, not at SmackDown itself, but rather the Royal Rumble, our first men's tag team title match of any kind on a pay-per-view since WrestleMania 9-10 months ago. That's just egregious that it took this long, but I mean, listen, better late than never is what I say. So I thought that was a pleasant surprise. Around the women's segment as well, I will mention this. We had a vignette for Charlotte Flair. I mentioned at the start of the review that we had a return date announced, the Charlotte Flair return. And they announced it as being at the Royal Rumble. She's going to be in the Women's Royal Rumble match. So they put up that vignette for her last week and got people thinking like, oh, yeah, maybe she'll be returning on SmackDown before the Rumble or after the Rumble. And they are taking a different approach with Charlotte Flair than what they've done in the past with her. As far as, is she returning at the pay-per-view itself or around that time or whatever? No, they're actually announcing her for the Rumble. They're taking the approach of what they did with Edge a couple of years ago when they announced him before the Rumble. Then he was in the Rumble match. That was his big return after, not when he came out of retirement in 2020. I'm talking 2021. He was injured for 6-7 months. They announced him for the Rumble. He was in the Royal Rumble. Cody Rhodes, 2 years ago. He was out for a number of months. They announced his return for the Royal Rumble, and he was back in the Royal Rumble. What did those people have in common? Edge and Cody both were announced for the Rumble before the Rumble, and they won those respective Royal Rumbles. Honestly, out of everyone that has been announced so far for the Women's Rumble, Charlotte Flair has the best shot of anyone of winning this thing and going on to face Tiffany Stratton at WrestleMania for the WWE Women's Championship. So the fact that they announced her now, honestly, increases her chances of winning the whole thing. I think her and Tiffany is the match that makes the most sense. Anyway, it was just always more of a question of how do we get there? Do we have her win the Rumble? Does she win Elimination Chamber? We may have found out our answer. She may win the Rumble. And honestly, it's not the worst possible scenario. No woman has won it twice so far. She won it last time, exactly 5 years ago tomorrow, actually. That was the first time she won it. The last time she won it until maybe next weekend. So we'll see. Daniel M. said, Motor City Machine Guns and DIY will cook at the Rumble if they get the time. I completely agree. I think if they're given the time, that could be an absolutely excellent match. But the question is, are they given the time to work well with each other and have awesome matches? That's the time. I mean, that's the real question because they haven't really been given a whole lot of time on SmackDown. They were a couple of weeks ago. On pay-per-view, sometimes they're shorter matches. So hopefully they're given time. I know the Rumbles are going to last a while, but they should be given time, hopefully, at the pay-per-view itself. Daniel Malcolm says black and gold NXT vibes for the tag team title match. I completely agree. That definitely feels like a black and gold NXT matchup. That's a match that absolutely belonged in NXT 10 years ago, but it should still be great on the main roster in 2025. Let's see. Did Charlotte look different to you in the vignette? Yeah, she looked a little different. I almost thought it was Carmelo. I was listening to Solid Monster's review of the show and he said the exact same thing. Yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was Carmella. For a second, I think when we were watching the vignette last week, because they didn't show her face initially, they showed her from the side. I think Alexis thought, and a few other people thought when they saw that, they thought it was Tiffany. Because I mean, the blonde hair, I could see the similarity there from afar. But when they first showed her face, yeah, she looks different. I don't know if she had something done while she was gone. I don't know. It's not really our business, I suppose. It didn't really it's not like it bothered me. But yeah, she definitely looked a little bit different than the last time we saw her over a year ago. But at the same time, honestly, she could have looked like that the last time we saw her on TV. But that was well over a year ago, and we just don't remember. She's kind of kept a low profile. I know she posts pictures and stuff, so I don't know if she's looked like that in the pictures. I don't know if I follow her on social media, so I'm not really sure. But she did look slightly different than the last time I remember what I remember her as, a year ago. Let's see. LA Knight, Tama Tonga also having a one-on-one match. The commentators mentioning that Tama Tonga doesn't really wrestle a whole lot single matches, or wrestle a whole lot on his own in singles matches. And I think one of the last time he wrestled on his own was in the King of the Ring tournament last year, where he actually beat LA Knight in the quarterfinals, I believe. They had a quarterfinal match, Tonga beating Knight. This time, LA Knight avenging the loss. So what I appreciated about this match, the next match between Damian Priest and Carmelo Hayes, and Kevin Owens versus Jimmy Uso, what I appreciated about all three matches was that they did not have non-finishes. I was expecting in any of those matches, I don't know if we got any non-finishes on the show, actually. I think it was all like some distraction finishes and shit, but no like DQs or countouts, which WWE does at least one of on almost every single episode of Raw and SmackDown, specifically with the Bloodline shit, and that did not happen here. So I appreciated that. No Solo Sikoa, for those wondering on the show. He walked off in silence last week. No real update on his whereabouts, where they're going with that. I'm thinking, are they just, what are they wasting our time for? Let's move on from this shit. Have Jacob Fatu destroy him. Maybe they're waiting to do that in the Rumble or after the Rumble. But like in the meantime, it's weird that Jacob Fatu wouldn't, explain or address the fact that is he following Solo anymore? What are we doing here? That just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Daniel also said, which I completely agree, give Jacob Fatu promo time every week and I'm good. Listen, I agree. He's awesome. Jacob Fatu was great. He got more promo time this week. I thought he knocked it out of the park once again. The Knight Tonga match was good. We got to hear from Knight a little bit beforehand. I think LA Knight also declared himself for the Rumble last week. Shinsuke Nakamura declaring himself for the Rumble on this show. He's not fucking winning, but Nakamura has won before, so they're going off of that. That's fine. And LA Knight mocking Jacob Fatu is funny too. Did he mock Jacob, or was it just Tama Tonga? I know he called Tama Tonga Tommy Tonga, which was funny. I don't know if he was talking to Jacob. I missed that part, but the match itself was fine. LA Knight winning, picking up a much-needed victory, but I'm just sitting here wondering, like, what was the point of this? I know they've been feuding as of late. We also got a face-off between Jacob Fatu and Braun Strowman afterward to set up their match, or build towards the match, not set up, if it's already been announced, but build towards Fatu and Strowman at Saturday, and its main event coming up tonight. I get that. But you would think that they would have done, I don't know, just at least explained, is Tama Tonga in the Rumble? We know LA Knight's probably going to be in the Rumble. I think he said as much a week or two ago. But like, oh yeah, he mocked the shaking thing. I forgot about that. You're right. Yeah, that was funny. I thought that was, I totally forgot about that, but that was pretty fucking funny. But yeah, like, where are we going with Knight? Does he still have his sights set in the United States Championship? Is he running it back with the Bloodline again? They got to figure that shit out. Damian Priest is not just a Raw superstar appearing on SmackDown. He is a firm member of the Blue Brand now, facing Carmelo Hayes on the show. And he had another good showing, did Hayes in defeat. He's got to win more matches, but that might be the story they're going with. I don't want to give him too much of the benefit of the doubt in case he is indeed directionless, which is very possible. That seems to be the case with a fair amount of people on both brands right now, but specifically on SmackDown. Seems like a lot of shit on SmackDown is just happening for the sake of happening, and there's a real no substance behind it. Carmelo Hayes is one of those guys where he's on TV every week, and that's great. And he shows up, shows out every time, has fun matches, but never really wins when it matters most. He did in that feud with Andrade, but he did not win the United States Championship. He should have, but it's fine. He hasn't, he lost to Strowman a few times, or at least once. He beat him by count out. It hardly matters. He lost to Cody Rhodes, lost to Sami Zayn, lost to, I think, Jimmy Uso last week. Maybe it was a non-finish. I don't remember. I think it was a non-finish. Which was nice. He didn't get beat, but he got beat here by Priest, who is now on SmackDown. So some transfer window updates. Priest is on SmackDown. That is a move I approve of. I think he is the perfect candidate to transition over to Friday nights. He had done everything he could do on Raw. The Judgment Day stuff ran its course a while ago, but they put the exclamation point on that in the street fight a couple of weeks ago on Raw. Not the Netflix debut, but the second week when Priest beat him. So there was no real reason to revisit that. And then he's also already challenged Gunther unsuccessfully for the World Heavyweight Championship a couple different times. Unless he was going to get his win back by like winning the Rumble or something, which wasn't going to happen, then I think him going to SmackDown was the best course of action. What he does at Mania, this doesn't really answer that question. Maybe we get Priest and Nakamura for the United States Championship. I've said that before. Because someone asked me, like, what does Priest do at Mania? I'm not really sure, but they could do something with maybe Priest and Nakamura for the United States Championship, because otherwise I don't really know what you do with Nakamura at WrestleMania for the United States Championship. I'm not really sure, but he is off to a good start because he beat Hayes here in what I thought was a good match between the two former NXT North American champions. And so Richie said here in the chat, Damian Priest getting away from Judgment Day is something that should have happened a while ago, but I don't know what he does for Mania other than a possible multi-man match of some sort. Yeah, exactly. That's what I said. Unless it's a multi-man match. Not that I didn't think of it, but I'm thinking that would be, he deserves more than that, because I don't know Well, I mean, he won the World Championship in Mania last year, so that was kind of his Mania moment, Mania match. He also competed in the Tag Team title ladder match last year. He didn't even wrestle at WrestleMania 2 years ago. He was at Mania at least twice, maybe at least once, for all the various Judgment Day matches, but he never actually wrestled. So he might be in just a multi-man match, which I could totally see. Richie Second Chat, he also said 2025 might be one of the more unpredictable years as far as who's winning the Rumble and who's facing who at WrestleMania for the titles, both men and women, in my opinion, and I'm loving it. Listen, if that's the intent to make it more unpredictable, then I'm all for it. I hope it's more of a case of making it unpredictable, and it's not a case of they just don't know what they're doing, and that's why it's unpredictable. Or it's a case of Rock is merely holding them up. Is he going to commit? Is he not going to commit? Is he wrestling? Is he not wrestling? Is he facing Cody? Is he doing something else? That's kind of the vibe that I'm getting a lot like last year. But we didn't find out about the Rock stuff last year until after the Rumble, when they already crowned Cody as the Rumble winner, and then Cody wasn't going to face someone for the world title at WrestleMania. We still have no fucking clue. In retrospect, we don't really know what they were going to do with Cody. We still don't know. They haven't really made that clear. Not that it really matters at this point, but I hope it's more intentionally they're making it unpredictable because they know what the card is, and we just don't know, and they're keeping it close to the vest, as opposed to they have no idea because nothing's set in stone, because Rock's involvement kind of changes a whole lot of plans. Hopefully it's the first one, but I can't say that with full certainty. But I do agree there's a lot of outcomes, specifically more so with the men. The women's Rumble, I kind of feel like Charlotte's going to win, and that's it. But you also have, Io Sky. There's a few other people that make sense. It's not that no one makes sense. It's just that, to me, I think they're probably going Rhea, and that's probably going to be it. Priest, you know what I was thinking before we get to the main event here? And I'll get to the other transfer window updates in a moment. I don't know if this is a good comparison or not. And I think someone else may have mentioned this on Twitter a while ago, so if I'm stealing this idea, I apologize. But I forgot who had mentioned it unless I'm just organically coming up with this myself. But regardless, him going to SmackDown, and I always thought he would be a good fit for SmackDown on his own as a babyface, because you know what it reminds me of? 20 years ago, Batista going to SmackDown. Now, Batista obviously was a bigger star in 2005 as World Heavyweight Champion when he went to SmackDown than Damian Priest is right now. But Damian Priest organically got over during Judgment Day as a babyface. He gets good reactions. And he was, like Batista on Raw, he was the guy as part of the Evolution stuff, and they switched him and Cena. So it's not like they're moving Priest to SmackDown to move like Cody to Raw, which they could. I don't know if that's the plan. I hope not. I think you can keep Cody and Damian on the same show, and it's fine. They need more. They don't really have a babyface problem on SmackDown. It's more of a heel problem, if anything. There's just heels I don't give a shit about or just don't really matter. You have a lot of baby faces, so it's more of a heel issue. But regardless, Damian Priest reminds me of Batista, where he was on his own, no allies really, for the most part. I know he had Ray after a while, did Batista, but for the most part, he was on his own. And he was a fixture in that world championship scene. Now, if Cody Rhodes stays on SmackDown, Damian Priest will not be exactly what Batista was to SmackDown in 05 through 07 or 08. But he's a guy where I could see it's a lot more likely for him to win a world championship, especially on a show where it's the focal point. Raw is going to be the focal point going forward, which is why I feel like Cody going to Raw could be possible. But Damian Priest going to a slightly smaller, pond, so to speak, even though it is a longer show at this point than Raw, which is funny in retrospect. I never thought we would see the day that would happen, but that's just where we are. I think he could do well. Because on Raw, you have Rollins, you have Punk, maybe Roman if Roman moves there full time. We don't know yet. But you have a lot bigger stars on Raw, and he's already feuded with Gunther. So at least on SmackDown, yeah, Cody's there. And you have a lot of big stars on SmackDown between, LA Knight is very popular still. Cody's a big star. Randy Orton is there for now. Kevin Owens is there for now, among other people. Roman for now. I just feel like he has a better shot on SmackDown of regaining that main event status that he had on Raw than if he stayed on Raw. If he stayed on Raw, the Judgment Day, unfortunately, is still there. Gunther is still there, and they work well together, but I don't need to see that revisited anytime soon. Unless he's beating Gunther, which he's not, I don't really think that would make sense. Before we get to the main event, let's get to the other transfer window updates. Totally forgot to mention that, but that was one of the things I wanted to discuss here. So Priest is now on SmackDown. We also found out that The Miz is now on SmackDown. So The Miz did admit here to Nick Aldis backstage earlier on in the show that he was indeed responsible for getting the Wyatt Six transfer to SmackDown, which apparently wasn't the original plan, but then Alexa Bliss's thing fell through, her return fell through, which on that same show that she was supposed to come back to last Monday, not this past Monday, but the Monday before that, they were going to reveal Alexa Bliss as being in the Wyatt Six, but then it fell through, so they moved her to SmackDown instead. Okay. Or not her, but the group itself. So that abruptly put an end to the Wyatt Six feud that he was having with the Final Testament. Now, the Final Testament is staying on Raw, but The Miz is now moving to SmackDown. So I guess they will continue that feud just with Miz and not them. Cross was the one who beat Uncle Howdy. Cross was the one that made beat Uncle Howdy. So Uncle Howdy is not getting that win back. But again, with the whole brand split not really meaning anything, maybe they did the rematch anyway. Who knows? Who gives a shit? I don't know. Really not that big of a deal. I do agree, Daniel. I will miss the Miz Cross interactions. LOL. They did work well together. I thought Miz, that was a good spot for Miz. It was a good spot for Cross. They were doing great work. Hopefully Cross can continue to do that sort of stuff with Sammy and with Rollins and kind of stirring up the pot there between those guys, creating tension and whatnot between those individuals and maybe Drew again, who we already played mind games with years ago. But yeah, Miz is now on SmackDown. He's doing his thing. What that really means as far as his future on SmackDown, I'm not sure. We saw him interact later on with Andrade, so they might have a match next week or the week after. Miz wanted him on Miz TV, and I think Andrade wanted the match instead. I don't know if they're doing Miz TV or a match. Maybe they announced that. I don't know. But I could see the Wyatt Six continuing to kind of make life hell for the Miz at the very least if we're not getting Karrion Kross with the Wyatt Six anymore. It was funny because Nick Aldis told Miz, you're going to need to find some new friends. And then he did in 8-Town Down Under, to which then Nick Aldis then informed him that they will now be moving to Raw as part of the transfer window. So those are moves that don't really matter. Priest moving to SmackDown, Bayley moving to Raw, that shit matters. Wyatt Six, it doesn't really matter, I don't think. But with 8-Town Down Under going to Raw, that's a move that, again, won't really matter. It's not like they were really doing much on SmackDown. They were teasing a split for like what felt like a decade, and then they kind of moved away from it. At this point, I don't give a shit. Does anyone even really care? They're just another team for that Raw tag team division. And at this point, I just feel like you can do, at least on Raw, they can be fed to the War Raiders or another team like Alpha Academy or whoever the fuck else. I'm not really sure. On SmackDown, they weren't going to do anything. They've already lost to DIY and the Motor City Machine Guns and all those other teams a whole bunch. So I can't really say them staying on SmackDown, moving to Raw really means anything. But it did make for an entertaining moment when Miz was like, oh yeah, you guys can help me with the Wyatt Six. We're all friends now. He didn't say the Wyatt Six because he knew that they wouldn't help him if he mentioned that. And then Nick Aldis informed them, you guys are moving to Raw without Miz. And then I think Austin Theory said, oh, yeah, we could still be friends, right? And Miz is like, I don't give a shit. Like, if you're not going to help me with the Wyatt Six, then no fuck. We're not going to be friends. What the fuck are you talking about? And it was funny seeing Miz there with Theory and Waller because it's like all three of these guys are almost exactly the same. Like, not exactly the same, but like Waller and Miz are very similar. And Waller, Miz, and Theory especially, three very similar dudes. So it's probably for the best that they're not on the same show anymore. That's honestly part of the reason why they probably did that. Kevin Owens and Jimmy Uso was the main event. Like I said earlier, they interacted earlier on the show. A match that meant nothing. Kevin Owens has really been carrying SmackDown, the 3-hour SmackDown, since the start of the year. Cody Rhodes is doing his due diligence and promos and stuff. But Kevin Owens is the one wrestling. He had a match here with Jimmy. Last week he faced Rey Mysterio. This was another good match, another match that had a decisive finish with Kevin Owens winning. But between Kevin Owens winning last week against Rey, winning this week against Jimmy Uso, it further reinforces he is not winning tonight. It makes me laugh that people actually think Kevin Owens has a chance of winning that championship tonight for real. I know he has a Winged Eagle belt. He's not actually the champion. We know that. If they were going to have Kevin Owens win the belt, he would have already done so at Saturday night's main event. And if your question is, well, then why are they doing this in the first place? It's to kill time. It's to kill time. And the feud was good. They work well together. It's been a fun feud. I'm totally fine with them doing another match, but we just know Kevin Owens is not winning. I will not be disappointed when he doesn't tonight. I was a little disappointed he lost, not clean, but like, because Cody Rhodes technically cheated at Saturday night's main event the last time. But it depends on what this change is being made to the match. Maybe they'll make it more unpredictable by making this addendum to the contract. I don't know. Maybe it is a loser gets transferred to Raw type of thing, because otherwise I can't really imagine what that change would be. Daniel also said KO wearing a Naomi shirt while facing Jimmy was a nice touch. Easy for me to say. I know I agree. I thought that was a fun moment. I thought Kevin Owens is just great. I think he's just a tremendous heel, and he knows like the little things to make that shit matter. And so yeah, he beat Jimmy. Cody came out, they brawled, blah, blah, blah. The usual stuff. So I thought it was a pretty standard way to go off the show. But I just feel like with Jimmy Uso being in the main event, that to me was enough of an indicator SmackDown shouldn't be 3 hours. There's just no reason for it to be a 3-hour show. Kevin Owens and Jimmy Uso you could have done Kevin and Rey in the main event last week, and that would have been fine. Kevin and Jimmy, The match wasn't bad. I don't really look at Jimmy as being like this amazing worker because he's good. He's fine, but there's far better people they have in that spot that could have had a better match than Jimmy Uso. And it's not even like it was this storyline rich match because, again, it wasn't. It just wasn't. So Kevin Owens made this shit matter, but beyond that, this was a very missable main event, a very missable show overall. A lot of stuff happening as far as like the DIY MC MG announcement for Royal Rumble, the final hype for Saturday night's main event. They had a video, like tail of the tape type video package for Jacob Fatu and Braun Strowman that I thought was well done. New additions to the men's and women's Royal Rumble matches. They announced more transfer window updates. So there was a lot to talk about, but as far as like the actual matches, Owens and Jimmy, Priest and Hayes, Knight and Tonga, like these matches don't fucking matter. Some of these matches are good or very good, but the matches just don't matter. We need more actual storylines. You know, you got to call a spade a spade. If we're going to do that with AEW and say a lot of these matches are great, which are better than a lot of the matches we get on WWE TV, but they don't matter, you also have to do the same thing for WWE. And I feel like that's been the case with SmackDown, especially in the last couple of weeks. This show, again, I cannot say it enough, is not sustainable as a 3-hour program. It's just not. Until June, as a little experiment that's cute, but they should have made this a little experiment a month fucking long, or a week long, or 2 months long, until Mania. June is like, oh, that feels like it's a decade away. At the rate that we're getting through these shows, it feels like it's a light year away, and it cannot come soon enough. Don't want to speed through the year, don't get me wrong, but these 3-hour SmackDowns are certainly a chore to sit through. And that was SmackDown in a nutshell. So for the show tonight, like I said earlier, we already ran through our predictions the other day. For Saturday night's main event, I'll give it to you real quick here before we head off. We are getting the contract signing. I don't know what the change is. I'm going to guess it's maybe a transfer thing. Kevin Owens loses, goes to Raw. But again, does it really matter? He shows up on Raw anyway, so who gives a shit? That's not a match. That's a contract signing, but I could see that happening. Rhea and Nia, it's comical to even offer a prediction, but we know Rhea's winning, retaining the championship, obviously the women's world title. Jacob and Braun should be fun, honestly, as a monster match type matchup with, a similar Braun and Bronson Reed from a couple of months ago. They worked really well together. I see this being similar. Obviously, Jacob Fatu will win, I would think. Unless it's a non-finish, but that would be lame. I would just give him the straight-up win. I would not do any non-finishes at Saturday night's main event. I don't really think that's ideal, in my opinion. But you have that. You have the Intercontinental Championship between Braun Breaker and Sheamus. I think that'll be a very good match. I'm going to go the safe route. I think WWE is going the safe route in the show. I'm going to say Breaker retains and Gunther retains the World Heavyweight Championship against Jey Uso. Now, could I see one of those titles changing hands? If any of them are changing hands, it's the men's titles and not Rhea and Nia. Rhea and Nia is the most predictable match probably of all time. But the men's matches, I don't think they do both title changes. I could see, if anything, I could see Jey winning the belt for a quick minute, not like literal minute, but like a week or two or a month until Chamber. As I've said elsewhere, though, I just don't like that because we just saw Jey hold the belt for a month before. So, I mean, it's better than him constantly losing, but he'll still be over if he loses here. Maybe someone interferes to, like, set up his next feud, or maybe it's Drew. I don't know. I was thinking at one point maybe Goldberg cost Gunther the belt, which would be just awful. It would make for a great moment for Jey instead of Gunther and Goldberg, but it's like, do we really want that? I mean, personally, I don't, but it's probably going to happen. Not the Goldberg interference, because I heard he's probably not going to be on Raw anyway, unless it's a surprise appearance on Monday night, because they're not advertising him in Atlanta. But it's something to keep in mind. So those are my last-minute predictions for the show. They haven't changed since Thursday for those curious, but thought I would repeat them just for the sake of it, because the show's coming up in a little over 3 hours. So we got to get out of here so I can watch that show, so you guys can also watch the show. But I appreciate you tuning in late here on a Saturday afternoon, early evening. Daniel said, regardless of Gunther retaining tonight, it feels more and more that he won't be champ heading into Mania. I'm getting that vibe too. I've gotten that vibe for weeks. I think there's a good chance he loses the belt at Elimination Chamber to either Rollins or Punk, so they can have a rematch for that championship. I know Punk and Roman is the rumored match. I still don't really see how that makes sense. I know they had their interaction in November. I know they're both Paul Heyman guys, but like, what is the point of having them? Like, is it going to be for the belt? Like, I don't really want Roman in another championship match at Mania fucking again. No thanks. So I don't know. That's not really something I want to see personally. But I don't know. I guess we'll find out. I am also getting the feeling, though, that Gunther will not be World Heavyweight Champion at WrestleMania. I am also getting that vibe from the reign that he's been having so far is an underthought, or rather an afterthought on the SmackDown brand. But that's going to do it, guys. Thank you so much for checking out the reviews. As always, I appreciate it. Be sure to like the reviews and subscribe. Hit the bell button to be notified every time a new video goes up and we go live here on the channel. And that should be for on Tuesday for hashtag AskGSM, answering your questions from Raw the night prior, any last-minute Royal Rumble predictions and previews and speculation and stuff. Anything going on in the world of wrestling, the fallout from Saturday night's main event. So send in those questions now. We'll answer it in the chat or on the video on Tuesday. So until next time, guys, have an awesome one. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.